it is worth the time to start trying to build a relationship with a calf buyer, a calf dealer, or finding the right way to market your calves.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Dairy Science Digest. This is a podcast designed to bring the Journal of Dairy Science straight to the ears of dairy producers. My name is Reagan Bluel, and I'm from the University of Missouri Dairy Team, and today we have a guest from the Ohio State University, Dr. Locke, to talk to us about the value of calves in your operation. And as many listeners already know, the national beef herd is the lowest it's been since 1952, and this market condition has created the perfect storm that dairymen have been waiting, frankly, for decades for. So now, all of a sudden, our baby calves have value. And so the stream of these animals have been named surplus calves and was the focus of the research that was recently published in the Journal of Dairy Science titled Understanding Challenges and Strengths in the Post-Dairy Farm Surplus Calf Value Chain. And there's been so many changes recently in this phase of production. This is such a timely topic. And Sam, I'm so glad that you're here today to talk to us about it to help these producers best navigate the opportunity for this revenue stream. So welcome to the Dairy Science Digest, Dr. Locke. Would you please be so kind to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sam Locke. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at The Ohio State University. I had to get used to that. I am originally a Florida Gator for my undergrad, and you can't forget the.
Yeah, doesn't it feel a little presumptuous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just a little. Anywho, carry on. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So I have a pretty strong industry background in the dairy sector. My grandparents had a dairy farm, and I spent a lot of time working on a commercial dairy farm in Florida before I came back to school. So the dairy industry is near and dear to my heart, and it kind of kicked off this research underneath my supervisor, Dr. Greg Habing, where we're trying to really focus on the bull calves and how we improve their welfare and start to bring together the different producers throughout the surplus calf value chain to strengthen the industry as a whole.
Absolutely.
A little bit of background.
Awesome. And so this month's paper is structured just a little bit differently than others in the past. This data was collected through an interview of folks in the industry. So let's kick off this discussion a little bit by framing your research participants. Who were they and how were they located?
There's been a lot of work done in different countries, namely Australia and Canada, focused on interviewing the dairy farmer about their bull calves. But nobody has really looked in the United States and interviewed veal or dairy beef producers or those people that are involved in calf marketing. So marketers for us are people that work at the actual livestock auctions or the calf dealers or calf jockeys that are out there purchasing calves and moving them around. So we wanted to focus our interviews on participants that are not dairy farmers and hear from them, because we know that the communication back and forth can be a little lacking at times.
You bet. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I hope that this discussion helps to advance that connection and make sure that everybody in this stream of livestock production can be aware. So again, there were no dairymen, and these growers and marketers, they were primarily in the Midwest, and they were independent owner operators, and you classified them as small. Could you quantify maybe what small sounds like when you're talking about your interviewees for this project?
Is actually we're a little all over the place because we had to interview people that were willing to talk to us. So on the veal side of things, there are only 4 now major companies that produce veal. So we get in touch with the majority of them, and most of those interviews were conducted with people that were fairly high up in their management structure. On the dairy beef side of things, that's where we ran into the smaller owner operators, anywhere between 100 to 300 head at a time.
Okay.
That they would grow out and then send either to the feedlot or directly to the processor. It's a little hard because we had a number of diverse participants.
Well, and doesn't that exactly mirror the dairy industry? Nowhere is there the exact same dairy, right? And you have different sizes and different practices and just the heritage of how their family farm has operated in the past. And so It makes sense that it would kind of mirror that in this particular setting, but I do want to address the word surplus calves. And I know there will be some listeners out there that think to themselves, well, I don't have any surplus calves. Do you want to speak directly to those producers?
I feel like surplus calves is a term that has been previously used, which is kind of why we're still using it, coming from the fact that historically your bull calves were byproducts. You wanted them to hit the ground and then leave quickly
Yeah.
because labor wise, I know it's so difficult to manage your heifer calves and your bull calves. They need to go.
Yes.
I think that's where surplus kind of came from. So we also call them non-replacement calves. But basically, it's the calves that you don't want to keep in your herd to maintain your lactating herd.
Sure.
And it can be bulls. It was historically bulls, but we're seeing more and more heifers enter this stream. So we might need to rethink this term in the future.
Right. Right. Could you define what kind of percentage were we talking as far as beef on dairy versus Holstein calves, or was it highly variable?
Extremely variable. On the veal side of things, they prefer the purebred Holstein, and that has become a major challenge for them because obviously dairy producers have realized that pulling in that beef genetic and having a crossbred calf is more profitable. So the veal side, mostly purebred, but they will accept crossbred when there is no supply of purebred Holsteins around. And then the dairy beef, it's probably more crossbred, but at the end of the day, they need to keep their barns full. So they were taking whatever they can get because of the lack of supply on the commercial beef side of things. They just need to raise calves, and whatever the dairy farms can produce and give to them, they will take.
Sure. And so when was this actual survey completed? And do you think that that had an impact on some of the responses?
Yeah, so it took about a year with our last interview in January of 2024. I would say overall that the market hasn't changed much from when we were doing the interviews, except for the fact that these surplus calves are getting more and more expensive.
Just, yeah, more valuable.
Yeah.
And you made a comment in some of the background of the paper. It was talking about in 2021, which was not that distance of a past. We know that the average value of these surplus calves was $106. So $100 in 2021. And now in December of 24, it was 587. And I think everybody has been tracking and realizing the value that some of these calves are going for over $1,000. And it's just hard to wrap your head around this situation. And so let's talk about some of the themes that emerged when you were talking to these calf buyers. What were some of the big arching thoughts that?
Yeah, so it's funny. We noticed while we were doing this research that sometimes our themes we broke them down primarily into strengths and obviously challenges, and sometimes those themes mirrored each other. So there were participants that loved getting their calves at the sale barn, and there were participants that really, really wanted that direct connection with the dairy farm, but they have not been able to create those relationships yet. Some of the reasons why participants liked to buy their calves from auction settings was that they could control the quality of the calf that they were purchasing. Whereas they found that when they purchased from a dairy farm, they had to take everything. They had small calves, they had to take the free martin heifers, they couldn't control the calf that entered their raising facilities.
Right.
The ones that wanted the direct relationship with a dairy farm, they wanted that because they also thought that they could get better quality calves if they had a direct relationship with a dairy farm, because they could work with a dairy producer to handle any quality issues that they perceived. And they also got around the issues we have with long distance transport with calves, because I would say that's right now the number one issue that is talked about when it comes to surplus calves is long distance transport. We have to get them off the dairy farm and they need to get to a raiser, but that could be 20 hours on a truck or multiple sales through different livestock auctions, then 20 hours on a truck. So that ends up causing a lot of health issues down the line that these producers have to deal with.
Yeah, to kind of speak on that. Yeah, I'd like to pull up a quote that was documented in the paper. It says that the fewer times that they get handled from the day it's born to the day it's processed or slaughtered, the better off the industry is going to be. And of course, all of these quotes are going to be anonymous from the folks that were interviewed. But I think that that kind of hits the nail on the head. And perhaps although the buyers thought that they could perceive quality of the calves as they were going through the auction ring, I do think if there was a way to unify and create a situation where they are being handled less. These little calves are fragile. They're a little delicate. A calf buyer quote that you had in there, these baby calves being a perishable commodity. And of course they're a perishable commodity, right? We all know that, but there was just something about reading that quote, right? That helps me remember that everything that you do to make that calf a little more successful is going to make your calf buyer happier. And when the calf buyer's happier, perhaps they're going to be more consistent in their arrival, more consistent in their pay price, and more consistent to helping you be more successful as a dairy farmer. So this transportation piece is pretty delicate. Let's talk a little more about the efficient and timely process of gathering them all up.
So we have producers that consistently send their calves to a local livestock auction on the same day every week. There are calf dealers that go to dairy farms in a region and gather all the calves on certain days of a week, bring them back to their own collection point before shipping them to a dairy beef producer somewhere else. And then there are a couple dealers that we ran into that would go collect their dairy route, then go directly to the dairy beef producer. So taking out that middle collection step. There are also, we didn't speak with any of these people, but there were reports from other livestock market representatives of calf jockeys that, would buy calves up on some livestock market auctions and then go sell them at another livestock market. So there's a lot of movement going on, and there's no one specific route for every calf. So it's a bit messy, murky.
Yeah, right. Well, and certainly putting any laws or policies or procedures around that kind of controls free market. I doubt that there's very many listeners today that would encourage that situation. And I did find it interesting. You quoted something about Canada trying to control the age of transport. Could you talk a little more about the Canadians' policy up north?
Yeah. In Canada, they just a few years ago put into place a regulation where calves must be 9 days old before they leave the dairy farm. And we actually had some participants that specifically in their interviews said that they hoped that the United States never did anything like that because it would be very difficult for them to manage.
Sure.
So some of the calf buyers did not think that that would be the good way for the surplus calf industry to handle improving transport for these calves.
Yeah. Can you imagine being saddled with those animals for an additional 9 days? Yeah, or I mean, I guess an additional week, because a lot of times they leave day 2, day 4, something like that, and I think everybody's experienced that, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, is this bull calf buyer ever going to come?
Oh,
Right? The frustration on the farm with each individual animal and just the cost associated with that policy could be tragic. But there was data that you guys referenced saying that when the animals are transported greater than a week old, they do tend to require less antibiotics and they do tend to flourish a little more. But wow, what a challenge that would be.
yeah. And we are hoping in future grant research to be able to look a little bit more, not at having calves leave the dairy farm at a later age, but if there are things that dairy producers could do to prepare the calves for transport better, like making sure that calves get a milk feeding before they get on the trailer, or, getting some electrolytes before they get on a trailer, could potentially help them handle those transport conditions a little bit better.
So when you were talking to these guys, did you run across any of them that were actually testing the serum of the calves and kind of paying premiums for those dairymen that are doing a great job with boots on the ground?
Yeah, there was one calf dealer that we talked with that he was very big on data collection and following calves out, and he kind of works throughout the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
He would be one that would have his guys have routes, and they would bring calves back to his collection facility where they would
Hmm.
be fed, they would have their total proteins checked, and then after having, a meal and maybe an overnight stay or two, then they would go on those longer transports out to a dairy beef raiser. So yes, there are calf dealers out there that are willing to do that and also work with dairy producers on
Hmm.
potential vaccines on the dairy farm before they
Sure.
get to the trailer.
Right.
Those guys are out there. And he was one that was very positive, very excited about improving the genetics that the dairy producers choose to get
Hmm.
a better calf to go into the dairy beef industry.
That's great. And we really need to connect these individuals together and have some unified education developed so that folks are making the right decisions. Because as I talk to dairymen, all of them want to make the right decision. We just have to get the left hand talking to the right hand to make sure that these things can go together. I found it quite interesting how many comments were talking about the reduced access to expert advice. And
Yeah,
and so if we have any listeners out there that are in the expert arena, what could you speak directly to them about? What should they be providing the industry?
question. It was a little all over the place, like from different producers where they felt like they were missing expert advice. So we had some that felt nutrition
Mhm.
was a little difficult for them,
Mhm.
but I would say primarily it was on health issues, which kind of surprised us, but also the whole beef on dairy breeding, it's taken off, and those animals are not the same as a purebred Holstein.
Genetic, they're
Yeah,
not.
there are
Yeah.
genetic differences. So the lack of expert advice is not necessarily not having an expert, but we just don't know yet. Like we're still
Yeah.
building up that information and we need to do a little bit more research. These, especially the beef on dairy calves, they're a little bit different. They're not a
Mhm.
purebred Holstein.
Mhm.
And then there were issues with expertise availability more on the processing side, I guess, with
Mm.
being able to market the calves once they're grown out in a appropriate way. There were some concerns about expertise with grading, which is a USDA thing
Mm.
and not
Mm.
necessarily,
Mhm.
so feedback from the packers back
Mhm.
to those dairy beef producers, I think is going to be big.
And so you're gonna have to almost rely on the calf rearer to communicate back to the farm to make sure that that message gets heard. And, shameless plug, I'm super excited for American Foods Group just built a facility here in the state of Missouri. And as they process, there's gonna be real-time data understood about that carcass. And so the hope is that there will be that feedback mechanism or that feedback loop if you have consistent suppliers to best understand, is it working? Is your system working? And so hopefully that will be a way to communicate and really refine our stream of beef that's being provided from the dairy industry. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
I love it. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the themes that were developed around these answers or responses on vertical integration of the beef on dairy and or perceptions from the buyers on large versus small farms?
Just like I mentioned earlier, how some of our themes, the strengths and challenges kind of mirrored each other, perspectives from different participants could be on, positive and negative. So when it comes to vertical integration in the dairy beef industry, there were some marketers that believed they saw that coming down the pipeline, and it was not something they were looking forward to because that cuts out the need for the livestock auction as a middleman, right? So they're going to lose,
Sure.
potentially lose their business
Hmm.
if that becomes a widespread approach to handling some of the challenges with surplus calves. As for the small versus large dairies, the opinions around that were varied, right? Like we had calf buyers that thought that the quality of calves coming off of large scale dairies was much worse compared to a small family farm. And then we had those that loved getting calves from larger dairies because they had those set protocols in place and they knew the majority of what they were going to pick up every time was going to be a calf that they liked quality wise or got their colostrum, potentially received some early life vaccines and could handle the transport out deeper into the surplus calf industry. So opinions are varied and it's
I
all in
guess we
place.
all have one, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And but it's good that you guys compiled all of these thoughts and statements and in a scientific manner analyze them to help us guide a path, kind of chart a direction forward because this isn't going away, guys. There's zero reason to believe that we're going to have a change or swap in the market for a few years unless there's some sort of strange black swan event, which we all know. But barring no major event, we're looking at a solid few years at minimum. And I think in doing that, we're going to create a platform of an opportunity where these growers are going to understand how consistent our baby calves are. And this consistency through the feed out phase is going to help them make educated decisions and marketing those critters. And I think we're going to set an industry foothold in the beef industry and where we've belonged for decades. And it's just super exciting to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we kind of came away from this research knowing that if we can improve that communication and build those relationships or do our part to help build those relationships between our dairy beef producers and our dairy farmers, then there is more consistency in calves coming off of a dairy farm genetically and also timing wise. Like we've got a consistent supply of calves that are going to be put into the beef industry and processors like that. Consistency is good.
Sure.
So if we can improve these relationships and help dairy producers make choices that the dairy beef raisers see that the calves can handle things better, it will just make the foothold in the beef industry solidify and hopefully keep prices up even as the native beef herd starts to
grows.
Yeah.
Right, right. One quote that I read that I thought was interesting that maybe we could touch a little on is the challenge with health was a tangible discussion point and reflected in the day-to-day concerns of calf raisers. So how can we as a dairyman audience here help alleviate that?
So, and I know dairy producers, they have to look at the cost of things that they are putting into a bull calf that's leaving the farm, but good colostrum, getting their colostrum on time, and potentially vaccines. I know vaccines are another cost to go into the calf before they leave, but if a dairy beef raiser sees that they are consistently getting calves from a source that handle the grow up period better, they're going to want to keep buying from the same source. And it didn't really get put into the paper, but we did have some of our participants talk about that, how they have swapped where they get their calves because they had a better quality calf. We had one raiser swap from getting, calves out of Ohio to getting calves from further away solely because of the health of the calves and how they handled the raising period in their barns.
Sure, it matters. It really does. So if there was one theme that you really want boots on the ground dairymen to learn from this informative project, what would that be? How would you summarize this?
It is worth the time to start trying to build a relationship with a calf buyer, a calf dealer, or finding the right way to market your calf. You might be losing out on some value by sending your calves just to the auction every week. Because the auctions are not ones that are necessarily looking at the quality of the calf. Like that's not their role in the value chain, but there is the potential to work with a calf buyer or with dairy beef raiser that's more vertically integrated that could improve the profit that you make off these animals.
Sure.
We found that some of these dairy beef raisers, these calf dealers, they are looking to build those relationships with dairy farmers. So they're out there.
Absolutely. And as I've worked with some different budgets here this year, it's made tangible impacts on guys' bottom line. And so you have to take a moment to think about long term. If this marketplace persists, then that relationship that you're going to be building upon here in next week could impact thousands of dollars of return, even for a 100 cow dairy. And so keep that in mind and understand that whatever efforts you put towards this enterprise on your farm is going to have a direct impact in your bottom line going forward.
I used to work on a large dairy farm in Florida, about 3,100 milk.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with my old boss the other day, and he said they made certain reproductive choices to improve the lactating herd, but
Yes.
they missed out on $3 million of beef on dairy bull calf profit making those choices. And I
Yes.
like $3 million. Like there is a lot of money that could be made with these beef on dairy calves.
Yeah. Wow. That's an incredible number. And it's real, and it's absolutely real. And that's only talking about just that baby calf, and
Yeah,
not at all quantifying the genetic progress that you're making by accurately selecting the most desirable replacement mamas for your herd. So it's just exciting. What an
yeah,
exciting time we live in here with the dairy industry and how we are getting there. And
yeah.
it's going to be good.
I
Yep.
agree.
Well, Dr. Locke, this has been a great discussion. I thank you so much for your time and willingness to share the science with our audience and to help folks best understand the opportunity in their surplus calf market. And listeners, I applaud you for taking time out of your day today to better understand the dynamics of this industry and what your role is in it and that relationship building component piece. I've really learned a lot from our conversation, and this has been the September edition of the Dairy Science Digest, which is a monthly podcast project designed to bring the Journal of Dairy Science straight to the ears of producers. Because we highlight peer-reviewed research articles and press because it's sound science to base your management decisions around, provided to you by your University of Missouri Dairy team. So please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get future editions straight to your cell phone. This is Reagan Blue with the Dairy Science Digest, and I hope you have a great